Welcome to yet another awesome episode of Empire State of Cannabis. I got a really cool guest here today, actually live, my first live guest in over a year. It's good to get back to that. Reggie, the founder of Canna-House. Reggie, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Kaylin. This is a great experience, man. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah.
Talk a little cannabis with you.
Absolutely. And I just met Reggie in person.
Yes.
We've been talking for a little bit now, but has one of the coolest cannabis businesses that I've heard of in New York State. I hear a lot all the time, obviously. So, Reggie, why don't you tell me a little bit about what Canna-House, or what it is?
Sure.
And kind of like how you got into it.
Yeah, no doubt, man. So Canna-House, we are, we'd like to coin it as New York State's #1 platform for cannabis consumption. We're a membership-based club. We curate and host activity-based events. So from puffin paints to cooking with cannabis, murder mysteries. You know, we kind of run a full gauntlet of events.
Puff and paint.
Paint.
What is a puff and paint?
Yeah, puff and paint is we've partnered with a really dope company in Buffalo by the name of Paint the Town.
Okay.
Jarrell's kind of a leader in the art scene, and he created this paint and sip format kind of in our area. And so we kind of took a spin on that, and instead of painting and drinking, you know, we're painting and puffing.
All right.
And we canify kind of that experience in that event, man. So it's really been a big hit for us.
Yeah, and so it's really started to take off, like a lot of interest. I mean, obviously we're coming off COVID, and you know that put a damper on any events, right?
Talk about it.
You know, what kind of interest do you see in the Buffalo community? Because you know we talk about Buffalo a lot, and actually our last guest, Nee, talked a little bit about the culture that's really developing in Buffalo, which just seems cool. I mean, I spent some time up there, and it just seems like it is developing in this lot of energy, you know, kind of a hub around cannabis. So how has the community on the consumer level kind of responded to what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's been successful beyond our thoughts. You know, originally we set out to be kind of this safe space for consumers. Oftentimes, you know, we were kind of consuming in the dark and smoking in our cars or with our friends. And so we wanted to create an experience around consumption. And so, you know, once we did that, you know, we started to realize how much of a demand and desire was there. You know, I think initially people didn't even know they wanted it.
Yeah.
And then as they heard more and more about it, like, man, I would love to experience this. And once they kind of get, you know, kind of in our grasp, so to speak, you know, they're caught up in it, man. And that's why we love the membership club, because it allows them to kind of, you know, grow the community beyond just that experience they had with that one event. They can really be a part of us all the time.
Gotcha. So it's a community that you're almost curating, that's, you know, making connections and bringing people together, at the same time giving them a place to not have stigmatization around it, and also, you know, a comfortable place.
Yes,
you know?
absolutely. Even privacy as well.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of people, we have a very diverse membership base from, you know, your, you know, I could say high status occupations to, you know, I guess what you would call, you know, your regular Joe. And they all kind of share the same common, you know, concerns. It's like, hey, man, if I do enjoy myself, I don't want to feel like somebody's going to take a picture of me and blast me somewhere. And so that's really big on us, that we, you know, as a club, you know, we're a tight-knit folk.
Yeah.
And so we try to make sure that everybody respects one another.
Yeah.
And, you know, we all share that kind of element of privacy and respect for one another.
That's
so
awesome. And, you know, I always say this all the time, I think cannabis is very social, but I think it's uniquely social, you know, on the East Coast and New York specifically, right? I feel like cannabis culture on the West Coast is social, but doesn't start from, you know, the best way I explain this, right, is, you know, growing up, right, you get introduced around cannabis when you don't have that much money to buy, you know, and I said, throwing fives.
Right.
Rolling and siphon, right? I mean, that's how a lot of people are introduced to cannabis. And I feel like when that's like the starting point, everything else is inherently social.
For sure.
You
For
know,
sure.
and I think that, you know, New York is different. You know, other places out West Coast is like, okay, you know, you know, the piece you have and the bud you have and the concentrates, blah blah. And New York is almost like, all right, what do we got?
Right.
What are we rolling up?
Right,
You know what I mean?
Right. No, for sure. And I also think, you know, regionally, I mean, the access is a big thing too, like that. You know what I mean? I think in our region because we just don't naturally have the terrain to just grow wild bud that's quality outside. It kind of does cultivate kind of the community to find out where the best stuff is or who
Yep.
has what. And so it becomes like this, hey, be a part of the scene in order to be in the know.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that also, trends to what New York is about,
Yeah.
from our, the origin of hip hop, it's about a scene. It's about creating this art scene, Fab Five Freddy's and the Basquiat, that whole era of just like we create the scene and then, we determine how we want to, move and groove inside of it. And
Yeah.
I think that kind of is where cannabis is for us now. As you mentioned, Nee from Sativa Remedy, big shout out to my girl.
Yeah.
She, we like to think that we're kind of in the know on that scene, and it allows us to just have these, constant bridges,
Yeah.
to different elements of the culture for sure.
Yeah, no, and I think it's interesting that you bring up, the creation of hip hop in New York and how much. Now, how would you say how intertwined music is in with cannabis and specifically hip hop and specifically when going on in New York? Because if you go back the history books, I mean, we look at why cannabis is illegal in general is because the jazz musicians, the daughters of the politicians thought the jazz musicians were a lot cooler than the other guys out in the, that the politicians wanted them to be with.
Yes.
And so they took cannabis as a way to persecute musicians in Harlem. And that's where the roots of prohibition is, right?
Sure.
So fast forward 80 years, prohibition's gone, but that legacy remains. And I think a lot of that culture remains.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair to say. I mean, I think hip hop being kind of the next driving or popular, genre of black culture, it definitely has a lot of similarities to the route of cannabis, right? I think it became more of a dominant force in society. It was legal. You can't make hip hop illegal, so it couldn't follow the same track. But surely, hip hop adopted a number of the bad traits that kind of government or Big Brother kind of would push on to our culture. And so, the relationship though with hip hop and cannabis is unique because oftentimes they're synonymous. Our identity with black association and cannabis is seen through the lens of hip hop, right? Maybe how you see Snoop Dogg is how you see black consumers, and we all don't look like that.
Yep.
And that's not hip hop's fault, right? Hip hop is what it is, and it's not all representative of all of what Black America looks like. But oftentimes that we see in America, the most present version or image you see of black culture often is miscalculated as the full representation of the culture. And so I think, for, nobody's fault, I think hip hop definitely kind of is walking that walk right now.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and that's a good point because, we see a lot of things painted with broad strokes, right?
Word.
And I think we're starting to see that a little bit in the cannabis industry and also the over-commercialization, getting away from some of that culture, right? I mean, you see that in hip-hop too, right? Where now hip-hop is like one of the dominant genres of music, period, right? So what are you seeing? You're starting to see kind of a, people taking advantage of that, right?
Yep.
And people trying to, like I said, over-commercialize. And we definitely see it in that cannabis industry. And so how do we, in New York, because I don't think consumers are going to be fooled by that, right? I think, we were talking earlier about this, there's a thriving marketplace already.
Right.
Right, we call it the legacy market. It's the market right now.
Right.
There is no other. Legacy say that it is past. It is not. It is very,
It's very
much so
present.
current. Exactly. Yeah. So with that, how do you think New York needs to move in a way that the products and the companies are culturally competent and it makes sense, right, within everything.
Yeah. I think there. If you start with embracing that existing market, right, in a way that is not always about providing a job or some giving opportunity. I think that's one way because it allows people that have this authority in this market already, regardless of your legal, signing off on their authority, they have this authority already. And it actually drives what the legal industry could look like.
Yeah.
And I think more often than not, there is a identity that has been projected on what it should look like for legal cannabis to look like, and when reality is it should reflect what it already is now, which is a marketplace that is diverse,
Yep.
that has a lot of players that look like myself, but there's no mechanism that really puts out trust for those people to transition from out of the quote unquote legacy market into the legal market. And so I think New York State would be, much better off in embracing how to transition that unsolicited market into the regulated market when it comes about. That's one way. And then second, I mean, just being authentic to the culture. There's a culture that drives cannabis right now. And again, I think oftentimes it can be pushed to the side in order for the bottom dollar to kind of be the present dominating factor in most decisions. And I think that's going to be to the fault of the industry as a whole, because you're just going to get a bunch of products that aren't representative of what people actually want.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And so now beyond just the products, though, we also talk a lot about equity in the space, right? And that, the bill here prioritizes social equity, diversity in the space. But that means a lot of things to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So when we say an equitable space, an equitable marketplace, an equitable cannabis industry, what does that mean to you?
It means it's so funny that we got to fall into equity now. Like we weren't equity partners when we were getting locked up, right? It wasn't a shared experience.
Yep.
And so it's funny that, I mean, equity simply means that the people that have been affected and most messed up by this war on drugs are to reap the best benefits from this. I mean, essentially that's what that is. But more than that, I think it really is an acknowledgement of what took place and not allowing the system to be recreated in a legal form, right? And so that's really what I think the equity is really about. I mean, the opportunities are great. Big shout out to Crystal People-Stokes and the job her team and those legislators did in getting 50% equity opportunities available for licenses in New York State, which is, I mean, that's amazing. But in truth, if there are systems, if there are mechanisms in place that don't allow those equity applicants to truly flourish and be their best selves, then we're really just duplicating this process all over again. And so that's what social equity means for me, is really changing the behavior that put us in here in the first place, right? Making sure that we don't have to apologize and give equity, again.
Yeah.
And so I hope that is kind of how things shape up, but, we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and, how much, and so I asked this question to Nee, and then my guest before, Katie Neer, who is a lobbyist for the Medical Cannabis Industry Association, asked the same question. I said, how much of equity is tied to or means, so does independently owned mean equity? And can you separate those two, right? Can you have an equitable space without a lot of independently owned businesses? And by just having a lot of independently owned businesses, does that necessarily mean equity, right? And so what I mean by, independently owned is businesses that are, someone owns, one location, two locations, three locations, and that's it. They don't own multi-state operations and stuff like that. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a thin line when you group everybody together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes equity needs to represent a particular group, and I don't think that those independent operators don't also need to have certain things for them
Yeah.
in particular, but I think that needs to be separate. You know, I think oftentimes, especially in our culture, in our community, we fought for, our lives have been sacrificed for things, and when it comes down to the change, everybody gets the results. But in truth, it was our blood. It was our families that were destroyed. It's generations of people who are sitting in jail behind this. And, you know, we didn't, again, share that experience. You know, so there needs to be something specific for that group. And then, again, that doesn't mean that that other group doesn't need something specific either. But I think there is a route to going about getting that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily fair to the rest of social equity applicants in this form to really say, hey, can we join in on that? You know, can we get some of those benefits too?
Yeah.
And you know, again, I think there's sort of a ton of crossover where our needs are the same,
Yeah.
but there's a history to the reasons of our needs. And so I think that needs to be acknowledged in how the programs are rolled out and who is in position to reap the benefits
Yeah.
of said programs and things like that.
Yeah. And how important do you think it is? Because, you know, there is these ideas on a idea and a theory level, right? Equity, diversity. You know, we got to make sure 50% of licenses, right? But when it comes down to the regulations, you can make it very difficult for that to be achieved truly. So, you know, we also discussed this earlier: is who's at the table,
Right.
who's actually, you know, suggesting these policies and ideas and regulations, right? And, you know, I don't even know if it's necessarily enough to say, well, we want a diverse board. Well, what does that diverse board look
Right.
like?
Right.
Well, what does that mean? Not only what it look like, what is their view? What is their connection to these communities? What is their track record of actually, you know, helping and breaking down barriers, right? Because you can throw up, I mean, you can say, yeah, 50% go to social equity licenses, and you might not actually be reaching those who have been most affected
Correct.
by prohibition,
Correct.
right? So, you know, do you think there's enough people at the table, you know, that are representing your views?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And I mean, it shows. It shows
Yeah.
in what policies are coming out and the conversation that comes out of these meetings. And yeah, there certainly is not enough representation. And I think again, I don't know if it's like, you know, did the egg come before the chicken come before the egg, like, but what it does is it really puts a restriction on the type of people that enter the industry, right? And so, or want to get involved in the conversation because, you know, they've lost trust in these entities that are supposed to be, you know, looking out for their best interests, and they just hear the same old thing. And whether, again, I don't, you know, naively or I guess optimistically, I want to say that that isn't intentional. You know, these guys, they mean well to the goal of diversity and equity is done in good spirit. But if you aren't actually involving the people that you're claiming that this is supposed to help in the process of planning said help, how do you know what you're doing is actually helping? Right? If you're telling me, hey man, everything I'm doing right now is to help a victim of domestic violence, but there's nobody of domestic violence experienced this, going through this within your board or making these decisions, how can you really know if you're invoking change? And so I think you know, there's a disconnect there, you know, that does leave, you know, people like me, people with my perspective, at a disadvantage. And so, you know, I was, you know, but it's getting better. You know,
Yeah.
I'm certainly not saying that I think this is going to be the final state of how things play out. But as it currently, you know, is, I definitely don't think there's enough representation at those tables.
Yeah.
Just speaking from the perspective in which, again, you know, these programs are supposed to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because you hit on a good point there that the people who have been living this on a day-to-day basis for years and decades, et cetera, aren't at the table. A big push is this, legacy to legal, getting legacy operators licenses. But how does the state actually go about that in knowing, saying, okay, we want legacy operators in. That's a great goal.
Sure.
Now, what does that mean?
What does that
like
look
what what are you gonna do? Say, oh well, yeah, I got 5 pounds on me right now. Like,
right. What's up? What you want me to do?
Like, is it you need? Is this the receipts you need? Like, and by very nature, right? I mean, anyone who's good in that business didn't keep extensive records or any records at all.
For sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you think the state actually sets a criteria for a legacy operator, or even messages and reaches out to these people, presuming they even want a license?
Yeah, no, that's true. That's their job.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, you know what I mean? I got suggestions, but honestly, that's your job. You created this.
Yep.
It's your job to get out of it. And you make decisions all the time that are difficult and tough to get to, and figure it out. That's what I say. Figure it out, because what you're doing isn't that.
Yeah.
And but to that point, I think they have to start embracing the pool of people. They have to open up the pool of people in which they're looking for some of these positions.
Yeah.
Right. If you're only a lot of these positions that are coming on the OCM, or these boards that will be created are going to be because of appointment. And they're appointing people who they know, or
political insiders.
And so again, the community doesn't have. Who's our board representation?
Yep.
You know what I mean? And these are the elements of the process that I just don't understand, how you would want this to be an equal, well, you say this is supposed to be a process of like equal understanding when there's only one side putting their input in. And so, yeah, I just think that they're opening up the pool of people that are involved in this, then starts for you to get a criteria.
Yeah.
Now, if you have an expert of the legacy market that you've proven on the board, and they can tell you what the criteria of a quality distributor is, who comes from the legacy market, they can start giving you these markers.
Yep.
Not somebody who's maybe work for the DA, or
Yeah.
somebody else who's saying, hey, man, I mean, whenever I've seen a drug dealer before,
Yeah.
they always look like this.
Yeah.
And so if they look like this, I mean, they're cool. Like, no, you should really have somebody who knows the legacy market.
Yep.
And you only know that if you start to have them in executive positions.
Yep.
And so, I think that would go a long way. You know what I mean?
No, I think so. I think you're right. And, I don't, so we didn't see the appointments. By the time this runs, maybe there's going to be some press around, who's on the board. But the names are being leaked out to the press. The names are hearing. Again, it's like you said, it's political insiders. It's people who may have the best of intentions, but they don't really have the knowledge and the background. They don't have much time, and they got to figure it out, and they got to make these hard decisions. Unfortunately, these decisions, I think, are going to be misguided, and they're going to be on the other side. And I think barriers to entry is the biggest thing, right? What are the compliance burdens? What are the costs to enter the space? You're really going to take someone's license away because they didn't fully set up the seed to sale tracking. Correct. Or like you had a couple whatever go here and there. I mean, because that's what the big cannabis companies want.
Yep.
They want places to trip up, right? Because they can pay enough people to make sure that doesn't happen to them.
100%.
But a small business such as yourself, it's tough. It's tough.
It is.
So
it's important that you leverage, experience though, even in other industries.
Yep.
I think in our community, we find ourselves. I know Canna-House does. We're big on relationships. It's all about building relationships because we're first generation entrepreneurs.
Yep.
My dad worked. My mom worked for someone, and that's kind of the experience of most of us. A big shout out to my CMO, Shine, Val, his parents, and his family owns a couple different businesses in the community here in Buffalo. But that's not the norm, right? My brother, we just grew up watching my parents work a job, and so a lot of the behavior and mindset that we have to take on as these entrepreneurs and CEOs of our own companies is learned behavior.
Yeah.
And so we then try to learn that from maybe somebody who runs a coffee shop. So it's not what I'm doing.
Yep.
But he has some expertise in running a business, and he
Payroll.
looks like me, and payroll and all of these things that takes me from this hustle and transitioning me into a business, right? I got to learn it from somewhere.
Yep.
And so it's important to build out those relationships within the community so that you can learn from.
Do you think the state holds
shared-
responsibility there, though? Because, they put this word incubator in there a bunch of times. What the incubator means, what it
sure.
doesn't mean, who knows, right? But do you think the state has a certain amount of responsibility to make sure that these entrepreneurs, social equity entrepreneurs, legacy entrepreneurs, are ready to go day one and that really understand? Or do you think it's really kind of up on their own? I mean,
No.
it's probably going to be up on their own anyways.
no, for
but
sure.
do you think there's a responsibility held with the state?
No, shit, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I think the state has a ton of responsibility. I mean, I think it's immoral almost to offer these things. It's disingenuous to say that you really want these licenses to be filled by qualified candidates and you don't do anything to help those candidates be qualified.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that makes no sense to me.
No, it doesn't.
Right? I mean, so absolutely the state needs to do that. But again, in my community as a black man, we just can't wait on that. You know what I mean? And I tell all my people, like, this is the opportunity to change our lives.
Yeah.
There's never going to be an opportunity this easy where we're right off the street. You're an expert. If you've been consuming for 20 years, 15 years, you know what you're talking about.
Yep.
Now you need to turn that street science into real science, right? Get some real knowledge behind what that understanding you have. You like, oh man, this weed always makes me tired. This weed always puts me up. So you're really explaining sativa indica or the terpenes that are affecting you. That's really what you're explaining, but you just don't know the terms yet. So matching that experience with professional terms, really is going to turn us into businessmen. But there's no other opportunity like that now. So we can't wait on, you got to go out and search for those opportunities. And again, relationships are huge because, that's how we met, right?
Yep.
I met someone who said, yo, I love what you're doing. The relationship that we have, I'm comfortable with introducing you to someone who I think can take your business to the next level or can help you out. And that's what you got to be about. And if you're hungry and you see that, I think that resonates with people who are moving and shaking in this.
Yep.
I kind of like what cannabis does socially, right? It just brings everybody together. You smoke with any, class or creed or, you know what I mean?
And instantly you
can
can start relating to
easily.
each other.
And it's the same thing with the
conversation.
hustle. Yep. It's like we meet on the same frequency. I'm grinding. You see I'm grinding. You know I'm about what I'm doing. And if I can help, man, sure, let me help that. You know what I mean? Just like a blunt. Sure, bro. I mean, I rolled this up. You walk into the party, you didn't put in on this, but yeah, you can hit this. You know what I mean? You can hit this joint.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and that's all part of it. And so what would you say to someone who's listening who is, maybe less prepared than yourself, but has had experience, who is in, a community where there isn't many opportunities, et cetera, and they're looking for, how can I take advantage of this, like you said, once in a lifetime opportunity, right? What would be your first steps of advice to them?
Education. Educate yourself. It's all about education. The moment you start to receive the data that you think the people you think are more prepared than you, once you receive the data that they have, you gather that information, your perspective then transforms that data into a weapon that only you can wield, right? So then I now have this knowledge based on, hey, I used to be a teacher or whatever I was, and now that I have this information, I can teach my community better than somebody else because I have this knowledge. So education is one, and then two, find your tribe. You know what I mean? Go out there. Don't be afraid to go find your folks. There's people out there who think like you, who move like you, who you don't have to over-explain yourself to. They're out there.
Yep.
But they're busy working. They're busy finding their tribe. They're busy doing their thing.
Yeah.
And so you got to get out there and get in the mix.
Yeah.
There's tons of organizations. Big shout out to M4MM, especially people who are minorities, black folks. Huge nationwide organization that really does lay out a lot of information. They gather a lot, get together, a lot of shared information. But you got to find those type of organizations who are going to kind of supplement some of that workload that you would have to normally do, right? If you can find a place that houses top 10 do's and don'ts for a new entrepreneur in cannabis, you're better off kind of just using that as your basis opposed to looking at 10 different places to get that information from.
Yeah.
And so education, finding your tribe, and doing something. Oftentimes we're just waiting around.
Yep.
Like you just said, state could do something, somebody else could do something. I'm not saying to go out there and do anything illegal, but I am telling you to do something. Get started. If that's find an ancillary business that you can get into until you can really transition your skill set into a legal thing, do that. If that's help somebody else's business, right? Figure out how you could be of value to the industry as a whole, and then see if there's a business that can use your skills.
Yeah.
You might not be built for the CEO right now because there's tons of shit you got to learn. So go learn that. And right now, so many people are looking for help. You can go get free education by just being a helpmate to somebody building out their company.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if you just think about it, I know in these times it's hard to imagine, but imagine if you were able to get a free internship and learn under Zuckerberg or Anheuser-Busch before it blew up. You were able to walk through and watch this conglomerate grow and
Yep.
you know, become an actual entity. That's where we are right now. That's what you have in front of you. You know what I mean? I think we talked about it earlier. The only big player really is like cookies, right? That's like a nationwide brand. That's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
that
And
just
I
has-
think you have these other companies, they want to be big players. They have big market caps, but no one's ever heard of them.
Right.
But everyone's heard of cookies. I think the most interesting thing about cookies, and, you know, they obviously know what's going on, whether they care or not, is that it's not just a big legal market brand, it's a big illegal market brand.
It is.
So everyone knows it. So when your state opens up and you have a shop there, well, everyone's going to want to be
Absolutely.
there. You know, so I think, I mean, they're definitely doing it right. But I think that, you know, Canna-House could be just as big as cookies. I mean, you know, that's
the
just
goal.
my bet.
No, I
right
appreciate
here,
that, man. That's the goal, man.
So-
That's the goal. Shout out to Cookies Burner. Holla at me, man. We can,
Yeah.
we can get you in the market up here too. Yeah, man. That's the goal for us to, you know, break these brands, introduce people to these brands. You know what I mean? Again, the culture is missing so much in so many of these strategies. When I see these corporate entities looking about how they're going to be players in our market, I'm just like, where's the culture?
Yeah,
You know, where's the
exactly.
culture? And I think that makes us invaluable. As an entity, not just as an event space or a consumption space, but being a platform that is authentic to the culture that birthed us, and making sure that we are a bouncing platform, a springboard for those who are trying to come up.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Yo,
Yep.
I'm coming through Canna-House. I can meet their members. Hopefully that gives me some brand exposure to markets that I'm not in. And then as we grow and we enter into different states and internationally, you know, we take these brands with us, and so we become kind of this you can't
Hub.
throw us away. You can't a hub that is invaluable. You know, you just can't throw us away. We are needed. We become a necessity in the game. I like to think of it like that. The little thing at the end of your shoestring.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't know how important that is until
it's gone.
Until
right?
it's gone, right? And you know you can't use it.
So how do people connect with you, Reggie, and join, you know, Canna-House? How do they connect with Canna-House?
Anytime you can hit us up on the website. We have a website, canna-house.com. Our social media, on IG, we are Canna_House. And on Facebook, we are Canna-House, Canna-House as well. So Canna-House.com, Canna-House on Facebook, Canna_ on IG.
Yeah.
We got an app coming out soon too.
Okay.
Yeah, so that should be interesting. Allow people to be a little more interactive with us.
Cool.
But go on the website, and membership is free. Free, 99. Membership is free. We really want to cultivate this community and bring us all together. So
Yeah. Awesome.
So thank you so much for having us on.
No,
man.
Reggie,
It's really
thank you,
dope,
man. This was great. Like I said, it's our first in-person conversation. I love it so much better than Zoom. I hate Zoom. Getting so tired of it.
So tired of Zoom.
So
bro.
tired of
So
it. But
tired of
no, this
Zoom.
was great. And if you're listening, listen, the only way you're not going to miss cool episodes like this is if you like and subscribe. If you're not liking and subscribing, you're going to miss cool shit. I mean, Empire State of Cannabis. So, and see everyone next time.